This is Antonio Moore from Your Black World, Boys Walking site. We have a great guest today and her daughter, actually. And I read a great article on incident they went through in regarding slavery in the classroom. Really piqued my interest because that's one of the areas that I really try to study on. And I wanted to bring them on to the Your Black World audience and give them a chance to discuss the article in more detail and really engage in the conversation about slavery and its impact going on into today. The article was on a site called Vox.com, Vox.com, and it was titled, "This Homework Assignment Says a Lot About How America Treats Its History of Slavery." The article was about a homework assignment given to the daughter of the young lady we're going to have on, and it was basically talking about Americans immigrating to America rather than being brought here through slavery. And it really brought about a lot of the core issues we have in regard to dealing with what America was well before, 1800, 1900, and how that gets kind of like diminished in the context of our history lessons today. You want to introduce yourself to the audience, both of you guys? Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. I am Brandy.
And I'm Desmond.
Yes. And we thank you so much for coming on, and brought you on to talk about this assignment that you got from your class. And I just wanted to know, just for the audience, what did this assignment make you feel like, just so I can, and what did this assignment make you feel like when you actually wrote it?
It made me feel very frustrated and irritated and really just confused on how the teacher can give me the paper and expect me to really elaborate on it when they sort of should know how the background of Black ancestry is.
Okay, and then for you as a mother, seeing that assignment and then like really contextualizing it for your daughter, how did it make you feel about your daughter and the education she was getting as far as U.S. history?
It made me feel like she obviously wasn't getting the full story as it related to the Black American. For them to use words like immigrate. Immigrate isn't exactly a word I would use to describe how Black Americans came to be in America. So it was very eye-opening for me, and that's why I felt like it was that much more important for her to submit the assignment as it was. I didn't see any reason to, edit it or tell her to hold back or no, erase that, do it over. No, give it to her just like that, because it was all true. So,
tell us about the article first and how it came about.
Basically, we were actually on Twitter. I was on Twitter just talking about stuff, and what actually brought about the conversation about the assignment was the officer actually dragging that girl out of her chair. And I said, due to my own experiences with, discrimination and racism in school, I always take it very seriously when my child comes home and tells me that she has a teacher that's treating her unfairly, or if she feels like if she's being treated unfairly. I take things like that very seriously, because the truth of the matter is there are teachers out there that just aren't fit to teach, young Black kids, or don't have the patience. They have a very vague idea of who and what they are as people. And so,
definitely.
That assignment came to mind because the teacher actually, after it was submitted, wanted to have a parent-teacher conference with me, which I declined. So essentially, Desmond came home and she had the assignment and she pretty much had zero interest in doing it. And I was like, well, I'd rather you get A grade than a 0. And so while I'm explaining all this on Twitter, I was like, oh, let me see if I could go through some old pictures and find the assignment and post it so you guys can see how fed up she was with this assignment. She really didn't want to do it. And she didn't like this teacher on top of that. And so I posted it, really not thinking anything of it. I just thought it was funny, honestly, because her answers were so blunt and curt, and it like literally took her, I would say, a total of 2.5 minutes. Like, she was like, here's the assignment, and I was like, okay, we'll write it down. She's like, Mom, I don't know the answers to any of this stuff. It's not fair. It keeps asking me about immigrants, and my people didn't immigrate here. And I said, okay, well, just answer it to the best of your ability. She sat down. I heard her scribbling furiously, and then she threw it on the coffee table and was like, I'm done, and went back to her book. And so, yeah, after I posted, and then I honestly wasn't expecting the response that it got. I didn't. Of course, it's a conversation that needs to be had, but I was not expecting.
Let me just say, I commend you in being an engaged mother. You know, so often we're taught to look at our children and see them as the problem, and here we saw exactly the opposite. And I just commend you personally. But even more so, you know, and what I feel is very interesting and telling about the assignment, like when I looked at it, was just how the questions pretty much omitted almost the entire history of what America was, and jumped right to the story of immigration. And, you know, one of the things that's so interesting about how slavery happened, and I did send over a piece that I did to you guys, and we'll talk about that a little later, is just how long slavery was, and how long it was, and then how, as a result, you would think it would be a bigger piece of the pie in terms of American history. Speaking to your daughter, I just wanted to ask you a question, like, so what did you think of the assignment?
To be honest, well, then... And just for a second, I'm going to actually pull up the assignment right now, and they'll see it on screen, but then now you can go ahead and just tell us what you thought about the assignment. Okay. Well, then of that age, I didn't really, like my mom said, I was really rushing through it because I didn't want to do it, and like I was so confused on how the questions really didn't go well with my ancestry background. So it was really confusing at first, and I was frustrated on how to even get the answers to the question.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's one of the interesting and telling realities of how American history is presented to our youth, is that it's kind of presented as though, you know, slavery, and there was an interesting another story that you guys might be aware of with another mother in Texas, I believe, where her son actually read a textbook, and the textbook described slaves as workers, not as slaves. Right. And so we have this new, and let me not even say new, this kind of continued movement to minimize not only the impact of slavery, but the reality of what it was. Mm-hmm. And when you really start digging your teeth deeper, it's like slavery was everything to the U.S., literally. And so, you know, one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about and also expose your daughter to was the reality of how deep slavery was in terms of American impact, not only in the South, but also in the North. And so, you know, one of the things that I thought was interesting about what the writer pulled out is the writer from Vox, his name is Jeremy Lopez. He particularly thought it was important to look at that last question, which is, why is it important to know your family history? And he thought that your daughter's answer to that was just so telling. I believe it was so that you know traditions and family values. And I guess I just wanted to know a little bit more from your daughter, like what she meant by that, if she still remembers.
I think that altogether that we should know our traditions and our whole
story.
Yeah, whole story, traditions, and everything that value it altogether.
Yeah, and the reason why I think it's interesting, you know, if I had to say, is that the institution itself, for what it was a stripping of cultural values in so many ways. And so, like, you have this institution that for hundreds of years, we were chattel slaves. Are you familiar with the term chattel slavery? A little bit? Okay, so they have traditional slavery, where you still are allowed to form families, you're still a human being. Chattel slavery is a form of slavery where you're actually like nothing more than a cow or a horse or anything else. We were actually chattel slaves for hundreds of years. And so there's this interesting idea of us having the qualities of of human traditions, human evaluations in the middle of American slavery. And I think it's quite disheartening how they're teaching it to our youth. And that's one of the things that I thought made this story so pivotal and poignant. What do you think, Miss Tennille?
I have to agree. It actually started stirring up some thoughts within myself, like, wow, I never saw it as that big of a deal, because when I'm reading, as I read the responses on Twitter from other people who also had similar experiences, there was one person who actually said that a teacher gave her a failing grade because she didn't specify which country in Africa her ancestors came from. And I was like, wow, what kind of backhanded mess is that? Like, it's a teacher. You know how slavery works. There's literally no way. All of us can't be Alex Haley. We don't have that money and those resources to be able to trace our roots back. And as you mentioned before, it was like an institutional thing. It was a big business to America, but at the same time, it almost seems like that information was withheld from us intentionally, very intentionally, because again, it was business. You can't sit here and tell me that Bank of America just all of a sudden lost all of its customers' names. You know what I'm saying? Like, they know how to find all their customers if you owe them some money. So if the slaves were the currency, how did they not have those records? You know what I mean? So it really kind of got a lot of that stirred within me.
And it's really interesting that you talked about Roots. One of my friends is Mark Walper. His dad actually did the original Roots. He produced Queen, and they're now doing Roots on the History Channel. It's this interesting dynamic of Roots and the generation that grew up when Roots was on television, because it was literally a monumental event when Roots came on. Like, more people watched it than had watched any television show, and as a result, a whole generation of Americans became exposed to some context of slavery. And now we have a generation from my age, my age forward, that didn't really see Roots on television the same way, and really, misconstrue the word slave and the way it actually was enforced for generations to really understand the context of being a slave for your whole life, and your children being a slave for their whole life. And I really think that hope that a lot of people tune into this next Roots that comes on to get more of that impact. Have you had a chance to watch any of Roots with your daughter, or have you had a chance, let me say, for yourself, watch some of Roots?
Oh, like you said before, it was a monumental thing. So when I was growing up, I really didn't have a choice. There was no two ways about it. But I haven't had the opportunity to actually watch it with her. I just kind of educated her myself and just never really shielded her from anything that, from the realities of slavery. These slaves were not interns. This was not an unpaid internship. They were brought here forcefully. I didn't hold any punches when the topic came up.
And it's really funny because I actually ended up buying Roots and Roots Next Generation for myself as my 30th birthday gift. And I watched it I watched the whole series and the next series almost 3 times already, like in the last few years. Not over like a week or nothing. But it's just a monumental journey to go through this period of time between, let's just say, about 1700, and Roots Next Generation actually takes you through the 70s and Alex Haley's trip back to Africa. And then it's funny, on a personal level, I actually got to go to South Africa last month for the first time. And I actually went to the place where they found Little Hand. Little Hand is one of the oldest human beings ever found. I went in the cave and I touched the cave bones. It was just a monumental trip. And I guess I'm coming back to the experience your daughter had in the classroom. I wanted to ask her, how do you feel about how they've taught you slavery up to this point, including this assignment?
Well, it kind of makes it seem like as if slavery really wasn't a big deal. Like, it was just a moment that, and it's just so weird how they really just make it seem like it wasn't a big deal and it's something that we can just easily get over, but it's not at all. Nothing that we can just forget out of our minds and just get over it.
I kind of wanted to capstone on is to come back and just talk to your daughter about this idea of slavery as an institution and contrasting that to immigration and seeing how she sees the two as different. Like when they ask you, because you went through these questions, do you have the assignment in front of you by chance?
No, that's probably somewhere in a box. Like I said,
no, actually. So well, let me actually pull that up because I wanted to go through that assignment a little bit.
I think I have a picture of it.
I got it right here too. If you could pull up a picture as well, would it probably help? So I have a picture of it, and I pulled it up earlier for the audience, and it was on your Twitter. So
yeah,
and it's funny the power of social media because that's how I actually hooked up with you. Is everybody. Black people got to get away from saying I don't use social media because of this or that, and like really understand the power of social media to be able to connect people that are of like mind and have powerful intentions. Because without social media, I could have no way to contact you. Neither could this author that wrote this original story, and we wouldn't be privy to all this great information that can be shared with other young children. So the 8 questions were. Let me go through the 8 questions. 1. Where did your family, and I'm gonna give the young ladies answers as well. So the assignment was entitled Family Origins. The first question is, where did your family immigrate from? Her answer was Africa, and it's very interesting, telling about that answer because Africa is a continent, and like we think of it as a country on a structural level, because that's the only way we can kind of relate to the whole space, and it's so large a continent that so many people don't even understand. It's not actually as big as it is on the globe. It's actually a lot bigger because they put it on there like on the globe that way, because if you actually put it the way it's supposed to be, it would be too big to really relationally put on the space on the circle. When we flew to South Africa, we flew to Amsterdam, and then we flew straight down to Cape Town through all of Africa, and it was a long flight. The second question is, when did they immigrate? Whenever the slave owners took them. Why did they immigrate? Because the white man wanted free labor. Who did they immigrate with? Other slaves. Did they know anybody here before they came? No, because they were stolen. What was life like when they first came here to live? Horrible. Do you still have family where they came from? I don't know. Why is it important to know your family history? So that you know traditions and family values. And it's very interesting. What's telling also about that last question is everything up to that last question has like a different energy to it. But then like the last question, the answer of it seems like kind of a shot at the assignment in so many ways, and actually a powerful shot at the assignment to say what slavery's impact was on blacks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And to your daughter, I guess I was going to ask, how did you feel when you did this assignment? Like, and I'm not trying to make you have any harbored emotions, but I'm just trying to share with the audience, like, where you were at when you actually were presented this.
Oh, like I said, I did feel really, like, when I first got in, like, when I brought it home, I did not want to do it at all. So I felt irritated already, and then, like, all these questions that seemed like, because I remember to myself telling my mom that I didn't think that these questions really could really sort of like connect with me. Like they didn't really make sense to me when I was writing them down. It seemed like it was just, I don't know how to explain the feeling then, but I guess I was just angry with all the questions asked towards me. Like this doesn't really apply to my background at all.
Yeah. And what's telling about that is so often our young children are presented these kind of questions, maybe not so specifically and succinctly as this assignment, and it puts them in the space where they might be frustrated. And going back to even what you were talking about with the young lady who had the classroom incident, it's funny because I did an interview with Raven-Symoné's father on that very topic. Mm-hmm. And we talked in detail not only about Raven's response, which everybody knows, but we also talked about the space she was in. Was she in a space where she could learn? Was she, this is a young lady who was an orphan, I believe she had just heard some negative information about what happened to her mother, and just the space that certain things can put you in. And I guess coming to you as a mother and asking you about that other amount of, I guess, the parent-teacher conference and everything else, how did you feel that related to this story, and how this teacher was able to really deal with the reality of what this story was doing to your daughter emotionally? I'm sorry, this assignment, not story. This assignment.
Yeah, it's fine. I honestly, when I read Desmond's responses, I was just kind of like, all right, well, standing your truth, turn it in as is, and whatever happens, happens. And I received a call. I knew that I would probably get a call about it. I knew that I would, because it was just, it was so, it left very little room for debate. But if slavery is a topic that makes you uncomfortable, as it does for a lot of white people, then, I know it would be something that, might kind of cause some static. And when she called me, she first asked if things were going okay at home. And at the time, Desmond sadly had recently lost her father. And so the school, the teachers, everyone was aware of that. So rather than taking this as an opportunity to open dialogue and having a more intentional conversation with the students, it became something's wrong with Desmond. Desmond is experiencing hardship. She's having an issue, and she's lashing out. And they didn't see it as, Desmond telling her truth. They saw it as her acting up. And so she asked if we could have, a parent-teacher conference. And I was like, I don't understand what we need to have a conference for. And she said, well, these responses are disturbing. And my exact response was, slavery was disturbing. Like it happened. It's a part of American history. That's true. So what are we having this conference for? And she said, well, I don't think that her responses were appropriate. She didn't curse. She didn't say anything inappropriate. Everything she said was pretty straight to the point. They were all facts. The only thing that I would say was not complete was what part of Africa she came from, or that her ancestors came from. Mm-hmm. And so, and of course, as a mother, when I didn't feel like Desmond was necessarily being attacked, but I saw I saw where this was going, you know what I mean? And so I pretty much, shut that down immediately. But no, there's no need for any further conversation. Slavery happened. I mean, talk to your students about it. Have a more honest and open and intentional conversation with them, but you're not going to penalize my daughter or try to attribute her responses to the fact that she's dealing with or has recently dealt with trauma, So, yeah, it was a very annoying, very annoying experience for me. And I was very, very resistant, which I'm pretty sure she didn't care too much for either. But the assignment, it came back home with no grade on it. So she passed the 7th grade, but the assignment came home with no grade.
Yeah, where are you located at, you guys?
Whitley in Delaware. I relocated out here for a work assignment, but we're born and raised Seattle, Washington.
Okay. And the reason why I was gonna say that is it's crazy because even on top of that is even regionalized because you start going into the southern states, into South Carolina. There's actually a celebration of some sort of not so much of the institution, but the buildings that lasted past the institution. The old slave mart in South Carolina, down the street from that church that had the killings. That still is a place that you can go and visit in South Carolina. And so it's this interesting dynamic of how America has never truly accepted what slavery was, and then as a result, how Black people are left to bear the cost of it, almost like alone. And then everybody acts like, why is it that we do this or that, instead of dealing with the institution that created why we did this or that. Negative reaction.
What frustrates me the most, and I appreciate that you said that, is that so many people don't like to acknowledge how much slavery impacted the state of the Black community, but and they speak as if it didn't impact the state of America's economy. Like America literally would not be what it is had it not been for chattel slavery, right? So like, I always say that this country was built on the backs of our ancestors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I did a piece on Huffington Post.
Like, you know,
I didn't know I was talking. There was a sound beep. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, that was like, you know, slavery helped elevate you higher, but slavery kind of, that very same institution is what's kind of held us back. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if you've seen it. There's like a little picture going around where it shows how long slavery was and how short of amount of time that we've been free. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you know, for me, I'm 33. My great-great-great-grandmother was a slave. You know what I mean? Like, I had my great-grandmother growing up. I could hear about her experiences, you know, working in white folks' home as an indentured servant. You know what I mean? And her experiences and things like that. We're not really that far removed from it, you know, if you really think about it.
And it's funny because you talked about that picture. I think you might be talking about a picture I actually created. I did it for Huff, and then it's going kind of around because it always was in my head that way. And I'll pull it up for the audience right now as I speak. But what I really wanted to do was kind of show like the length of slavery. Like if you were to break America down into 4 quarters, 1600, right, 1700, 1800, and then 1900s, and then have like, you know, the 15 years since 2000, American slavery, you know, on the chart lasts all of the 1600s, all of the 1700s, all of the 1800s. And if you really look at like things like Douglas Blackman's Slavery by Another Name, it really seeps well into the 1900s. It didn't just like end like people think. So like, you know, black people in context, you know, and then Jim Crow just extended that all the way into the early 70s. So like we've been free for a very small amount of time, but we have such expectation as a result of a number of things that came together for what's supposed to have happened over that time with no kind of like intense government intervention or right, no kind of redistribution. Like in South Africa, and I've shared this before, they redistributed a percentage of the land. Like what happened in South Africa is the black peoples, they ended up getting 8% of the land redistributed back towards them. Black people in this country today, I write on these topics quite a lot, but black people today, I showed this like a month ago and it just went wild on the internet. They own 1% of the land. We own 1% of American land. Mm-hmm. The whites own 98% of the land. Right. The 98% of the land that white people own is worth $1 trillion. We own $14 billion worth of land. That's it. And so like contextualizing that reality of how as a group, that context of the cost of slavery and the impact of being detached from a home country where you can leverage farmlands and things of the sort is just so diminished. And I wanted to share this with you guys. I know you guys read the article that I sent over to you, Slavery, Shadow, Reparations, and the Cost to Build a Nation. Yeah, I sent that over to you guys. Numbers, but people have to understand that America itself is only 236 years old. But American slavery actually started in 1619, and if you lose like kind of the latest dates, it lasted all the way to like 1862. Right. That's a long period of time. But in reality, you know, when Lincoln said let the slaves be free, he didn't enforce it. There was no teeth. So they were still snatching people up, keeping them as slaves. It wasn't until like 1942 that you actually had investigate. It was actually the President Roosevelt signed circular number 3591 legislation on December 12, 1941, making slavery actually illegal in the U.S. in 1942. Right. You know,
that's my grandmother.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, coming back to the assignment, it's just insane that we've come to a point where we just want to talk about America in the 1900s going forward, because you know, immigration is a story of really post 1900 America. This new kind of immigrant from all kind of different places coming over, the coming to Boston, things like that. But it's like America has a story before 1900 that nobody wants to talk about because it's just too dark. You know what I'm saying? What I was saying is that I feel like this assignment that your daughter was given about immigration, it's more about this person that came to America post 1920 and with dreams of an American dream, and not really even for us. Like we're not in the classroom.
Oh yeah, no, those assignments absolutely aren't. They aren't written for us at all because it completely erases that reality. You know what I mean? It's pretty much what it does, and not even just. This is particularly about slavery, and slavery is kind of how you and I are here today, but it even erases the history of the American Indian. The Native American. It's kind of like, okay, what is their immigration story? Like, it gets real awkward, and I mention them because we're from Washington State, so we have a pretty big Native American population there. So it gets real sticky, and it's funny that teachers don't, that they're like, it's just not written in a more sensitive fashion. You know what I mean? Simply saying, oh, just go back as far as you can. It's almost dismissive. You know what I mean? It's like, well, let's not talk about slavery. Let's just talk about your grandmother that came here from Arkansas. You know what I mean?
No, so I get it, but I feel like sensitive is being nice. I feel like it's almost not factual, because when we start looking at how we were socialized to believe that slavery was a Southern institution, it's just a lie. One of the things that I showed was that there were no ports out of the South. You had to make the cotton in the South, then ship it up north, and then it went out the north. What you have to understand is that the banks were in the north that owned the plantations in the South. What you have to understand is that all the clothes and the meat producing factories for what the slaves ate, and the North had tons of these things. So it was like it was such an institution of America, but it's been taught to us like the good people were in the North, the bad people were in the South, and as long as you get to the North, then you were safe. Right. And I think that does an entire disservice to everybody's role in this, and how, as a result, all of that money that was made, because it's the other thing that people just don't understand about the institution and about America is how much money was made during the period. When you look at there's a book called Outliers, and Malcolm Gladwell, I might even pull that up for the audience right here as well. Malcolm Gladwell did a list of, I think, the 75 richest people in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. And on that list, 60 came from America. 60 came from America.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So it's their wealth against the rest of the world at their time. So, like, to think about the kind of money that was being made in these plantations, in these steel mines, using black slaves or black chain gang workers in the 30s, it's just mind-boggling. And I find it to be a travesty that we as blacks are not taught that both at school, and how we as blacks really find that to be something that we don't want to talk about with our children because it'll make them angry. When it's just, that's the facts of it, and they need to,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just getting back, I guess, asking your daughter, she was saying that you got a chance to read this article on Huff that I did. What'd you think about that? I mean, had you been exposed to some of the information on there?
Well, some of the information on here, I did read, wait, hold on. I did read about it, but like sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't be sorry. Take your time.
Yeah. So I sort of did forget about most of the article. I did read it, and I did sort of understand it in the moment when I did read it, but the more the video link that you sent me, and that one,
Slavery by Another Name.
Huh?
That's Slavery by Another Name, I believe. I think it shows you how slavery continued past Lincoln said. Yeah. Have you been exposed to anything about that kind of story?
Not really. Like in school-wise, not really, but like more if me and my mom, then yeah, she told me mostly about it. Other than in school, it seems like they just dismiss it.
What do they really teach in school today, like about slavery? If you had to like say what it what it was?
It was horrible. It was saddening and horrible and just...
So what does the school teach you? What do they say about it?
Oh, it seems like, well, from my knowledge, not in this year, but last year in like 8th grade and 7th grade, they mostly teach us on how they did do the slaves and how they were treated and how... Sorry. Just mainly most of their background story and how they would get captured and how they would just get treated and brought to things as prisoners, really.
So, yeah. And so, like, when you say treated, like, being specific, like, what do they say about treatment of the slaves? Is it like a sentence or a paragraph, or is it like a video they show you guys?
They would sometimes show us a video, or they would just give us, like, reading packets, but, like, it wouldn't be as long, you know, like a whole article on it, but of how they were treated, but it would just be, like, mostly, like, a paragraph or two.
So literally, like, U.S. history, 7th grade, you're reading about all of American history, and for a year, you might get a paragraph on slavery.
Yeah.
When you think about the context of that against that chart, it's horrible. I mean, and it just makes you wonder about what do they fill the other time up with it?
You know?
Yeah, and I think that one of the great travesties about race in America today, post Cosby, you know, post Obama, and I know Obama's still in office, is that the contextual reality of its roots being built on an institution so horrendous as chattel slavery has been lost in so many ways, but the impact of that is still here. Right. And so, like, you have this kind of like push-pull where people are saying forget something that isn't able to be moved past because we're still in the midst of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you look at it from a cultural level, a psychological level, or a financial level, you know, Black people are still suffering from the impacts of hundreds of years of chattel slavery. And we're often the major proponents of saying, let's just move past it like it was like 500 years ago or something of the fact. Like it wasn't, you know, as recent as 1942. Do you agree?
I agree. And even if it was 500 years ago, the effects of slavery are still felt to this day. The institution itself was built on the notion that, you know, Blacks were inferior. You know what I mean? And that is a sentiment that is still felt to this very day. So don't tell me to move on from some shit that I'm still experiencing. Like, I should not be living the same experiences that my grandmother and great-grandmother and grandfathers, like, that shouldn't be a part of my reality.
Yeah, and you know, that's so telling because it almost feels like there's no space for the Black story inside of America. But the Black story is all of American history. And so there's this interesting dynamic where America is empty because it has not accepted its own soul.
Right.
And, as we come to the end, I wanted to give both of you guys a chance, but I also wanted to, Maya Angelou had this great quote, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave, I rise. That's what I thought of as I read your daughter's assignment and her answers. I thought of that particular quote and the responsibility we all have to stand up to injustices that are done to the legacy of these people. I myself am writing my own book on my 4 generations of women in the Moore family, going back to Maybelle, who actually was born into slavery. That's my great-great-grandmother, and coming all the way forward to my mother, Dreams of Moore. And I think that so often, the stories of these people has been lost. It's like we saw in the piece I showed you with Douglas Blackman, Slavery by Another Name. He goes down to Alabama to do another story. And the guy says, are you here for the graves? And this is how that video that I sent you guys came to be. And he's like, what graves? And these unmarked graves. And all these Black men that died in mines, mining for Carnegie, mining for Chase, mining for U.S. Steel, were just buried out here, and their stories just left untold.
Right.
So, I commend you. I commend your daughter today, and I just want to share this with Your Black World. I want to give you guys both a chance to maybe say a little bit to Your Black World, and maybe whatever you feel about what could be done to actually positively impact, let's say, middle school exposure to slavery.
I would say if there are any educators that are listening or watching, just kind of having a very honest conversation with your students about it. And not so that idea that slavery was this, like I keep referring to it as an unpaid internship, because it's I have this sad feeling that, 20, 30 years from now, that's what it will be reduced to, because it is not properly covered in school. And I can't expect, America's, educational institution to honestly acknowledge slavery if our own society won't. So, to all of the parents, just be honest and open with your kids. And if you don't have the right words, watching movies, I myself, I obviously need to watch Roots with Desi, but there's a lot of other movies that I've watched with her. We watch, Mississippi Burning. We watch documentaries all the time. We watch The African American on Netflix. We watch the entire series, just kind of giving her a very full, comprehensive view of, all of the struggles. I don't want her to feel like, oh, woe is us, or woe is me, our people are so, horrible and fractured, but it's more of like, look at all of the things that our people have gone through, and look at how we stand now. Look at us now. You know what I mean? We're so great, and we've made great strides despite all of these things. I don't want her to see slavery and the effects of it, though they can be a crutch, as we see in the news every single day. I don't want her to feel that way, like her hands are tied. She got really frustrated, actually, when she read your piece. She was just like, it's just not fair. How can they just say that they don't owe us anything? We deserve something, if nothing else, to be acknowledged. And I would say that would probably be the operative term right there. It's just acknowledging that slavery happened. It absolutely happened. If not, explain how the hell I got here. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, it comes down to bare bones, as simple as that. Like, okay, well, if slavery never happened, how'd I get here? You know what I mean? So I would just, advise, any parents, just be open with your kids and have that conversation. It doesn't have to be a big event, but just little things. Talk about little things in the news. Watch, little documentaries. Watch, movies and, things like that. And be honest with them and allow them to have a space to have that safe space at home to ask those questions, because they obviously aren't being challenged on these things at school. So they're not going to come home and ask you about that. They certainly aren't going to go to school and ask about it. It's kind of your job to educate them on those things.
All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, young lady?
I guess just be open and just be open and truthful about slavery, and don't let it just be dismissive. Just let it be known.
All right. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to the Your Black World audience. Again, this is Boyce Watkins site. We'll try to get this out to a lot of our people, and other people, so that we all get a exposed lesson on the impact of slavery, and also how these assignments might impact our young people. Thank you again.
Thank you.